Well, good afternoon, everyone who is going to be listening to this broadcast. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of having George Kinder, the head of the Kinder Institute, and who I call as the godfather of life planning, here with us. And we are going to discuss his thinking on the status of financial planning and fiduciary, and in reference to his latest book, Life Planning for You. So with that very short introduction, I am going to sort of dive into my questions to start our conversation. So welcome, George. Nice to see you from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and on this afternoon. And excuse me, just one moment. Let me get. There we go. Okay. Anyway, so start out, George. Just tell our viewers here about George Kinder before you discovered the world of finance and financial planning, and tell us a little bit about that.
Great. And first of all, Knut, I just want to say how thrilled I am to be here, and real admirer of your work and of your fierce stand for the fiduciary, whatever you call it, but the standard of fiduciary care for clients. Hugely in favor, and so thrilled with your leadership in that, and your fierce teaching to all of us at various points how it should go. So before I was aware of finance or anything, I grew up in rural Ohio, believe it or not. I was born in West Virginia, about as far from kind of civilization as I think of it now as you could imagine. But my parents sent, and I loved it there. I loved it. I loved the simplicity of the culture, kind of the middle class kind of orientation of people in general. But my parents were well educated and were determined to have me well educated as well. So in high school, they sent me away to a private school in New England, and 4 years later, I found myself at Harvard. And there, I didn't know anything about finance. My family wasn't in finance, there I entered as a math major because I really excelled in mathematics, really off the charts on all my scores there. Most people don't think of me as that because they think of life planning as being the soft side of financial planning. But that was my skill, was mathematics, and I went in and I found myself bored with math, and so I moved from math to economics, which was my first introduction to finance and all, and then from economics to a mix of history of art and English literature, where I found my creativity was finally really nourished and stimulated. So, and when I left, I had no idea. I thought I would be an artist or something, but it was very difficult to make any money at doing that. So I found my way into finance after that. But I did tax returns for a living for a number of years.
Okay. In the Bible of the history of financial planning, maybe Bible's too strong a word, and I don't want to be controversial here. Brandon and Welsh say that you got into finance because you could not find anyone to, quote, pay me to do what I loved.
Yeah.
And that's the story there. Is that basically true? Is that basically true?
That's totally true. And in a way, it's how I got into financial planning, because I had to figure out how is it that I can do what I love. And they had this saying back when we were young men that do what you love and the money will follow. Well, nobody would pay me for either my poems or my meditations. Nobody'd ever pay me for that stuff. So anyway, I went back to my mathematical skills and did where my aptitude was very high. Yeah.
Okay, so here you found your way into finance. You started as preparing taxes, I guess, and now all of a sudden, again, according to Brandon Welsh, you find your way onto a program at, I guess, an IAFP conference or something, and you have an audience, and you apparently wow the audience, because that seemed to be a good starting point for what got you into the next phase. And part of that, according to the story, is that's where you met Dick Wagner, I think. So anyway, talk about that for a bit.
No, I mean, I still thought of myself as a hayseed from St. Clairsville, Ohio, and so I'd never gone onto a national stage at all. But I lived and practiced my tax business in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Okay.
So, but I went on, and I did. I think people were really thrilled to hear from me. I had ideas that were outside the box, and I think that's what Dick and I connected around that. Dick was looking for that. He had his own unique set of ideas about how financial planning was revolutionary and should be human-centric. And I think he found my ideas wildly creative and quite stimulating, and realized that we had a fantastic partnership possibility there. We both recognized that. I remember we gave a few months later, we gave something together, a program at FPA Retreat, or whatever it was called, ICFP Retreat. And it was one of these programs where you give it 3 times over 3 days. And the first day, all the seats were filled. The second day, it was standing room only. The third day, people were outside in the hall. They couldn't get in. And I remember walking away, and I was thinking of, Bogey and Claude Rains at the end of Casablanca. We had our arms over each other going, okay, what's next, buddy? Where are we going next? And so it's just, it's wonderful.
Well, that is a great story. So that gets you launched. I think now we are roughly 25 years ago. We're early mid 90s is where you start going. And then when did the Kinder Institute, or I guess there were other steps along the way. You and Dick formed a organization together, and then later on with the Kinder. And by the way, I literally only knew Dick by a little bit by email and a couple of telephone calls, which but when I read his book, I thought, wow, to have a financial planner talk like that, to speak like that, it was just very rare. So anyway, that's one thing that I sort of remember from it. But anyway, so you have a couple of evolutions before you end up with at the Kinder Institute. And so you have been in at the center of financial planning as it has evolved over 25 or 30 years, and that's about half or a majority of its history, literally stated, coming from 1969. So I guess one piece I wonder about when you sort of stand back and look at the evolution in the time that you've been at the time that you've been at the heart of it, in the midst of it, how do you see the journey as it stands today after 25 years? Let's say 25 years. So let's start with that at a high level.
Well, Dick and I started an organization called Nasrudin, and it was a kind of a think tank. It's still in existence. And we partnered beautifully together for about 13 years. And then each of us in our own different way realized that we needed to go our own separate way. And so he stayed with the Nasrudin conception. He wrote the book that he wrote, and I went off and wrote a series of other books and designed a methodology for doing life planning. Nasrudin was more of a place where people gathered together and shared ideas and thought leadership in a variety of areas around the life planning concept, this human money. And my passion was, let's do it. Let's design the very best methodology we could for delivering people into their dreams of freedom and into their best interests, as you call it in the fiduciary movement. But if you think about the evolution of financial planning, you really have to go back to kind of the beginning and look at some of the roots where your work comes in, Knut. That was very important to me as well. The first organization that I joined, where I thought I'm proud to be a member, was NAPFA. And I joined it in the first year. I was one of the first 50 people to join the organization. And it really meant a huge amount to me because and I think everybody else in that organization was so passionate that the consumer was really being misserved. And the term fiduciary was around, but I don't know that we used it so much. It was the fee-only notion that gathered us all together at that time. But that also came late. You used to go back to the late 69, 70, when the financial planning concept first emerged, and that was kind of revolutionary. I always thought financial planning was a little bit ticky-tacky back in those days because, so many salespeople involved with it. So much of it was still product-oriented. And so when the fee-only movement exploded on the scene in very small numbers at first, I thought, wow, well, this really is making a statement and is doing what the consumers need. And then I think that what happened that I recognized and Dick recognized and a whole bunch of people kind of gathered around us who recognized it as well was that alone wasn't enough. That what we felt was the clients needed to be listened to in a way that honored who they were at their best and who they wanted to be at their best. And so our passion was to get at that root because that's what the money was meant to serve. So these last 25 years since Dick and I gathered together, I think that's clearly been my focus. It was his focus, Nasruddin's focus, the focus of the life planning movement.
Yeah. Very interesting that you mentioned NAPFA. I was not around then, but one of our first board members, Mary Malguar, was there at the very beginning. I mean, and she must have been just barely out of high school then, but
me too. She was.
You too.
I mean, I don't know whether you can say this, but she was a doll. I loved Mary Malguar. I promoted her. I thought she was brilliant and had so much passion. Eventually she was the president of NAPFA, but she was the one person I said she's got to become president of NAPFA because of her.
Well, she's been great for this organization. The way she had people come and into the institute, she's been fantastic. Anyway, that's my closest sort of connection with the original group of NAPFA folks. And anyway, so that sort of resonates with me. Dick, as I look back at the last and as I look back at the evolution, and I'll get back to some other comments you made there, but I look at this last decade, and my perspective is different from yours in that it sort of starts with what's happening on a regulatory basis. Sure. And I recognize that partially that doesn't tell the story. There's other pieces of the story out there, but on another hand, it does tell the story in terms of where the rules have how the rules have developed. And I go back and I look at the last decade, starting with the Obama efforts all the way through a year ago. And this last year, and I look at the DOL, I look at SEC, and I look at CFP board, and I see a pretty dismal picture in that. And again, the point here is not the law, but it's the logic behind it. When you go back and look at the origins of the 40 Act, what fiduciary was supposed to mean, it really was simple. And I think of this as our grandfather's generation. George, because the folks that got around in 1940, as the world in Europe was coming to a huge issue, and they came out with the 40 Act, and guess what? they got it exactly right. They
did.
got it exactly right. They understood that you had to separate sales and advice. They understood that you had to avoid conflicts at all costs. That's the essence of it. It's not complicated. And so from that beginning, we started out in a great place, but as it's come to pass over the last, I think, and I say the last 11 years, we've gone into a bad place. Those principles have been rejected by the SEC, now with the DOL, and unfortunately now also I think with CFP board, and so that's that's the picture from a regulatory basis. But I think it also it also goes deeper. But so that's how I look at it, and I wonder how are we today in a broader picture in terms of the evolution, given that that dismal decade, frankly, on a regulatory part, in terms of moving away from, and this is where I think you're exactly on par. In the last, I think it's the last 30 years, we've gone from stock pickers to active mutual funds to passive mutual funds. So the importance of prowess in investing has slowly receded, and what you are talking about, George, has increased. And so all this to get around to say, when I look at the very best of fee-only fiduciaries, I guess I wonder, how far away are they from the vision that you have? And I have a guess, but I'm more interested in your view on that.
Well, I couldn't agree more with your analysis of the regulatory environment and what's happened. I couldn't agree more, and it is enormously disappointing. I will go back in history a bit and go back to the beginning of the fee-only movement. At the beginning of the fee-only movement, the Wall Street Journal was filled with articles about personal finance where they quoted people only from NAPFA. I mean, it was amazing. That first decade, it was extraordinary. And so we thought, we were going to take over the world, basically. And it was a revolutionary movement. We felt that we were, kind of coming out of the protests of the 60s in some way. And here we are, we're going to change the world. But what we didn't really realize was the power of those articles that would come out once a week or once a month in the Wall Street Journal against full page ad after full page ad after full page ad after full page ad from the Smith Barneys, the Merrill Lynches, all the brokers, basically saying we're the ones to come to. We had the kind of the intellectual elite, but money talks. And same thing in terms of regulation. Who owns the Senate Banking Committee? Who owns the Finance Committee? Who has bought all of those people? So that's really one of the, you mentioned earlier that my latest book was Life Planning for You. Actually, my latest book is called A Golden Civilization. And one of the things I wonder, and I throw a challenge back to you in a way, is basically, are we down in the trenches too much around the DOL and kind of the fiduciary, the minutia? Do we need to go broader and more strategic? And because I think that it's a problem not just with banks versus us or brokers versus us. This is a problem. How come, Knut, after 250 years of the Industrial Revolution, we've seen this explosion of entrepreneurial endeavor, and we think of ourselves as being an enormously entrepreneurial society? How come, if that's the case, shouldn't we find at the top of every hierarchy of power after 250 years of development, the very best of humanity, our humanity, our compassion, our wisdom, and filtering down? And if we did, I mean, that's fiduciary. That's an attitude that takes care of the earth, it takes care of democracy, it takes care of clients, and that's beautiful. So I'm now saying, hey, let's go larger. Instead of doubling down on the small details, let's do it all in every way. Let's have a fiduciary standard for every organization. in society. So there's my my broad pitch.
Well, and actually, from what I gather from your broad pitch, I'm reminded of the institute gives out an award every year, the Frankel Fiduciary Award. I don't know whether your travels have had you cross with Tamar Frankel from Boston University.
Yeah.
But
I don't know her directly, but I have, I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's
Yeah.
95 years young, George.
Oh my
And
God.
she is always asking me, Knut, what more can I do to help you? I mean, she is just unbelievable. And in fact, she participated in our event last week to honor Ron Rhodes, and the video is on there. But I mean, she's unbelievable. But anyway, I think about her. Because she has a broader view,
Yes,
and I mean, she was born in Israel, and she at a very interesting time in history. So she has the broader view, and that's some of the things that we talked about. But also, so we've named an award after her, and our first honoree actually was also in your neck of the woods, and I know you know the name. I don't know if you know him, Bob Monks from Maine.
Again, I know the name, but I don't know him. Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, his career was corporate governance, because that's really what you are getting near to in the broad picture, without being hung up with the technical part of it. What is it that we should be doing at that level to understand and advance fiduciary principles? And anyway, that is what he's done. So that makes perfect sense. But I agree with you to the extent that getting bogged down in the minutia of what's happening on a regulatory basis is not as important as whether we as fiduciary advisors can do a better job of dealing in the public space when all the advertising and most of the news is coming from Wall Street. Can we do a better job of making consumers understand there is a difference and this is why it matters? And that to me is what it comes down to. And actually on that basis, in some ways, I'm more optimistic going forward because of millennials. Number one, they have different attitudes about the world. B, they're more comfortable with technology, and I think in the end, even though it's got its problems, shall we say, I think it's going to help indirectly propel a better quality of advice, even if that sounds a little strange. And so on that basis, I think and then social media. Look at the power of social media in terms of getting message out. So on that basis, I think there's reasons to be more optimistic now about what can be achieved by public education than I think as recently as 5 or 10 years ago, based on that. But so I think that is consistent with your view. So okay, let's drill down in terms of talking about really what it means on a practical level to be a life planner as opposed to a progressive fee-only financial planner. I take from your book, I love your example about Seth, in that book, and I think about that and wonder, how often is it possible to do that? What you did there, and is that opportunity? How wide is that opportunity for a financial planner who wants to do that, who understands what you're talking about, who understands that we need to shift places between the money box or the finances and the this is what I really want to do when I grow up. This is what I really want to be. This is what I really am. So that's how I sort of see your what your effort is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. First of all, I think that your organization and our organization, if I look for optimism, I would say that we're running along parallel tracks and we're getting the word out. We're creating life planners who, in fact, deliver people into their dreams of freedom in short order, in phenomenal ways, just because we've structured a process of listening and inquiry so that the client gets enormously energized and excited at the thought that they could possibly live the life they want to live, not 15 years from now, not when they retire, but now. And we give them financial, we say, look, trust us. We know how to invest. We know, how to do spreadsheets, all that. We'll make sure if you put your energy into the place you really want to live, we're going to make it happen. And so that's very exciting. At the same time, you're holding the standard for the fee-only fiduciary movement. And I think that the combination, one of the things I've always said, as you know, is that you can't be a fiduciary without being a life planner, because what we're really doing in our own way, in a different way, but still very important way, is that we're putting the best interests of the client first. And the difference between what we do and what say, as you were saying, a progressive fee-only person would do, is that we think of those best interests of the client as not having to do merely with our not having conflicts of interest and our having transparency and all of that, but our caring enough for the client to learn how to listen and how to inspire them to become the person they really want to be. And so we've designed a system that does that almost foolproof, Knut. It's just amazing how accurate the system is to delivering people into that dream of freedom. So I think that the combination of what you're doing and what we're doing is we're holding a standard that's very high. And it's unfortunate, I don't know as much about the CFP board and what they've been doing. When I hear little bits, I go, well, that's right, but that's not. They should be way ahead of where they are on that side of things. But I do feel that what you're doing and what we're doing is holding the standard that financial planning is destined, and financial advice is destined to move into, because it's the only humane way to do it. It's the only way that respects who the client is. So that's where I think.
Again, going back to, and again, I was sort of taken by your example of that one couple that you use in your book, the example of Seth, tell me that's not a cherry-picked example, in the sense that that's 1 in 100. But maybe explain why. I don't know what you have in your mind, but whether it's from a typical planner, that they should think that 1 in 2, 1 in 3 of their clients has this opportunity. Maybe it's 2 in 3, maybe it's 80%. I have no idea. But sort of talk to me about that.
Yeah, great. I mean, people come and they say, well, you can't do this with people who are poor. And other people say, well, you can't do this with engineers. And other people say, well, you can't do it with someone over 80. And we do it with everybody. And so, but there are people who resist it. But the people who resist it tend to resist it for reasons that you're very aware of, and I'm very aware of, which is that the broad basis of consumers out there, the foundation of consumers, don't know what fiduciary means. They don't know what a life planner is. So they walk into your office and they have all these veils of distrust. And right on, they should, given what financial services has been. Yeah. So the reason that people will hold back or doubt or whatever is because of those veils of trust. the reason that it works is that virtually all of us have ambition, have goals, have aspirations. Let's put it that way, aspirations towards something, toward a better life in one way or another, to be a better person inside of ourselves, to go after something that we really love, to playing jazz in a nightclub, playing whatever it is, playing saxophone, painting, doing still lifes like the beautiful still life behind you. People, we all have aspirations, or just simply recognizing I'm so busy, I don't have a great connection with my teenage daughter.
Yeah.
Really like to have that. And what we do in life planning is we listen and we go, let's make it happen. That's who you're meant to be. And the question that I would just throw back to you is just imagine that you're one of those people, we all have it, these little aspirations we haven't quite done. And imagine that someone said to you, Knut, I think you can do that. And I think you can do it now. And in the context of who you are and where you are, I think you can do it. And to have someone say that and have all the financial knowledge that you insist that your fiduciaries have, and have the standards of ethics and of fees and transparency, to have all of that, and to have then this listening skill and determination to go where the client is like meant to be. What could be better than that? What a great profession. And this is what Dick Wagner would talk about. What an incredible profession.
No, it is indeed. So, standing back again as the observer for the years that you've been in it, in the year 2020, when you look overall, and when I think of overall, I use the Cirilli numbers in terms of getting a picture of how many either brokers or advisors are out there facing clients, and his numbers come in just under 300,000. I think I just got 291,000 at the end of last year or something. 291,000. Wow. And of those, just to put it into context, sometimes I'm asked, why do I focus on CFP board? Well, because they represent a big chunk of that Cirilli 290,000. They're at 86,000. So it is a big number. So when you think of that universe, I mean, where do you see the financial planning movement being today? And sometimes what I say, and this makes some people feel uncomfortable, suppose you had to give it a grade. Suppose you had to give it a grade where, now, of course, you would give, in terms of setting the scale, this is all about setting the scale, and you'd give a life planner who's at that level an A, and maybe the other end of the scale would be a traditional broker who works like a traditional broker. And, I might say D minus, you may say an F, whatever. So in that scale, sort of where do you see the universe of financial planning be today? And do you have a sense for the trajectory going forward in terms of how quickly it's going to develop?
Well, let me share the pessimism that you started with around the Act of 1940. I think I mean, despicable isn't quite the right word, but it's something like that.
Yes.
That standard, which was exceptional, just exceptional in that time, and it coming out of the great crisis of the Depression, obviously,
exactly.
And it is horrible that standard has not grown and grown and grown and grown and grown, and developed and deepened and strengthened. And it is shameful. Shameful is really, despicable is probably too strong, but shameful. It is shameful. And so from that standpoint, again, how do you grade? I mean, the people are still people. They're still good people. I mean, brokers are mostly good people. And they care about their clients, and they care about their families, and they care about the country. So they're mostly good people. It's a question of do we have a system that in fact is good
Yeah.
and is serving all of its people. And this is why I say I think we need to aim larger and transform all institutions, make all institutions be fiduciaries for stakeholders, for democracy, for the
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
Because without that, we right now we see hierarchies of power develop, and those hierarchies of power have power all over the world. So we're developing these hierarchies of power that have greater and greater influence and greater power, and they're controlling the banking committee. And they are watering down that Investment Advisor Act of 1940. Now, so that's on the one side. So there I'm pessimistic, which is why I'm out there. I've become quite political, and I've said, let's do something about it. But
Yeah.
but on the other side, people are good people underneath it all. We all care about kindness. We care about truth. We might not know what it is. We might not know what integrity really is the way you do in fiduciary, but all of us care about our integrity. And so I think that from that standpoint, from the work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing, and in general, the CFP community is aware of what you're doing and pays it homage, and is aware of what I'm doing and pays it homage. If sometimes it seems like it's just this much, but I think from that standpoint, I'd give the people that I meet certainly a grade of B. And they're good people, and they want to do better. Yeah. They're eager to learn. Yeah. So, yeah. And I think financial planning. You think about it, Knut. There was no. I mean, it's a new field. Didn't exist before, and they had money, and they had investment advice, but not the overall financial planning and the whole client. So that notion that the whole client is to be cared for is at least paid serious lip service. It's lip service at times to you and me, but there's a seriousness to it. So there's a way in which I grade as a B, and there's a way in which I grade as a D, E, or an F. That's the truth of it. And meanwhile, I think what you're doing and what we're doing, we're up right there in the A's, and it's just fantastic that there are organizations like ours that are standing for something.
Right. Yeah. You made a really good point there, which I am very sensitive to. And if you take a look at some, I hope all of what we produce, it's reflected there, and that is the difference between the individual, in this case the broker, and the system in which he or she works in. And our focus of criticism is based on the system, because of exactly what you say, and we know from we know from the research, and we know from anecdotes that the frequency in which good brokers are not allowed to, or not permitted to, and explicitly prohibited from doing the things they would like to do, that's part of the world they work in. And and so I think that's a hugely important point there to make.
And they're educated in that way as well. All the education is from the standpoint of the corporation they're within. So they don't even know a lot of the possibilities that are there.
One of our board members was 17 years at Merrill.
Oh, wow.
And then he made the switch. And now he's 8 or 9 years out of it. And that's exactly what he talks about, George. What the things I did not know when I was in the system, it was mind-boggling to me. And it was only after he went through the last crisis and he saw things in a different light that he said, there's got to be a better way. And so after the crisis, he left, and now he talks about all the things that he just was not aware of. I mean, so
that's really why I think, in addition to the really extraordinary work that you've done, even though it hasn't paid off with the Department of Labor, for instance, in all the ways you would have liked it to have paid off, I think that it's important. As you know, I'm now promoting a single sentence fiduciary standard for all organizations, all corporations, all institutions, all governments. so that they really put our interests, the interests of humanity, of democracy, of the planet first. And
Right.
if we go at both down in the trenches and up at the top, I mean, the consumer doesn't know what fiduciary means. It would be wonderful if we had something where we were able to give to them, where they think of it. Oh, I see. It means that that all of these corporations that are polluting or that are paying off our politicians or are doing this or that, they have to put us first. Oh, wow, that'd be amazing. And it's called fiduciary, and that. So I'm.
Well, no, but precisely for that point,
Yeah.
our most recent publication is a 9-page ebook for consumers, bringing down these things of fiduciary to what what is really common sense. And
Yeah.
I didn't start with this by looking at the 1776 and say, let's call it common sense. I started this by drilling down at what the SEC is doing and looking at the crux of what they concluded, and said that doesn't make any sense. But if you look at it from the other side, this is what common sense is. And guess what? Common sense, in addition to being good law, the 40 Act, it was just common sense. Of course, conflicts of interest should be avoided. Duh. So anyway, that is what we try to do for our narrow world of fiduciary, and in terms of trying to get through all the noise out there, is to say, this is common sense. This is what you need to expect. This is what you need to demand. And if you can't get it in writing, then just politely leave the office or leave the Zoom, whatever it is, and say, thank you, I'm going to go elsewhere. So yes, that's, so you're right. They don't know what fiduciary means, but they do have a sense of right and wrong in common sense, I think. And that's the language we try to speak to make this easier to understand. So anyway, there were a couple things I wanted to come back to, but now, of course, I didn't write them down. But what does it take for what's required for a fee-only advisor? And I say that, but I shouldn't presume that, because I just assume that you've got all sorts of advisors in your program. So what does it take for them to get where you think they should be in terms of the training, in terms of the time, in terms of the financial commitment? What do they have to do?
Yeah. So just to clarify on that piece, we're in a small way a global organization. We have advisors in 30 countries on, I think, all 6 continents that have studied with us. And many of those countries don't really even know, Knut, what fee only means. In other words, that itself is a new concept to them that we're beginning to open up to them and all of that. And they're wrestling with it. And it's very difficult because of the regulations that they have to actually adopt a strict and pure, what you and I would know as a fee-only approach. So we do we figure that introducing them to life planning is one way to, in fact, get them to be more oriented toward the client in a very powerful way, and that's what we do. So we don't have a strict requirement on the fee-only aspect, but most of our advisors in the US are both CFPs and fee-only.
Gotcha.
In terms of the requirement, we have a 5-day training, which is incredible, because what happens is that we only take 10, 12, 14 people into it. And usually there are 3 or 4 or more trainers per those 10 or 12 students. And you come in for 4 or 5 days and you partner with someone and you life plan them and they life plan you. So at the end of that training, you know how to do life planning and you've been life planned. So that suddenly you're living the life. So your enthusiasm and your understanding of it is visceral and is very personal. And so you're
Yeah.
really ready to launch. And then we have a 2-day training that's more of a kind of a psychology of money out of my original book, The 7 Stages of Money Maturity. And then we have a 6-month mentorship.
Yeah.
And that's the basic program. And then we have ongoing, a modest ongoing CEU kind of requirement. But that's
Yeah.
the basic program. And it's an
Yeah.
inspiring, people are inspired by it, as I'm sure they are with your program as well.
Well, actually, I thought of you yesterday because not because I think you mentioned her in the credits to your book, but I was listening to Carolyn McClanahan on a program yesterday, and healthcare is not my niche, but I wanted to listen to her because she's out there and she is really taken that niche by charge. And I just listening to her, and I don't know how well you know her, or whether you've listened or seen her recently, but I mean, she talks about it, with such gusto and such passion and such enthusiasm. It did make me wonder whether she'd gone through your course, but she or not, because that's where she is. That's where she is, and she's atypical because she's a medical doctor, of course, as well. But anyway, I did think about
Yes.
you listening to her.
I think I haven't spoken to her since I was writing the book, so it was many years ago, and so
Yeah.
I don't know where she is now. But and I don't recall. My hunch is that she came through one of our programs, but didn't come through all of them. But I hesitate to say. But I
Yeah.
was just as impressed with her as you are now back
Yeah.
then. Yeah.
So, okay. Listen, to wind up, what else do you add? Would you like to add
Yeah.
to our conversation?
Well, I think that the thing that I've learned over all these years, going way back to the 70s when I first was aware of the CFP, and the early 80s when NAPA kind of exploded on the scene, and seeing the power structure between the advisors who do it right, the planners who do it right,
Yeah.
and huge product companies, I'm not sure much is shifting. And that's the pessimism that's there in the
Yeah.
power structure. And I think that it's time for us to take that power structure on. I think that, and I don't know exactly how, but I
Yeah.
think there's enough of us. We've grown. This is where all of those of us that I said on the whole we're at a B level, and I think that the majority of CFPs would like to take on the power
Right.
structure. And that would shift things at the CFP board. It would help your movement and my movement. I mean, we would be in the vanguard of that movement. But I think we need to address the power structure. And I think without doing that, it's going to continue to be a movement which is led by people like yourself and myself, small institutes that are really doing good work. They're slowly making a difference, but the big guys are still calling the shots. Whatever legislation is needed. So I think we need to take on the power structure, and that's basically it. And I'd say I think people should be politically active.
I think that's a very poignant and timely point to make as we are sitting here in early October 2020, and we look at what has happened over the last not 8 months or 6 months, but over the last 4 months in terms of some of the dynamics that we're experiencing. So good point, George. Very much enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for your time, and I hope that we can do it again sometime, because I sense I just sort of barely touched the surface here. So very much appreciate your time.